Ricky, Karl and Steve produced entertainment that transcends time. Despite recording their first radio show together in 2001, there's a stunning lack of oldness that you notice when listening. When you listen back, they don't often mention current events, and somehow the music they played on XFM still remains popular to this day. Clocks by Coldplay, for example. As time progressed, and as Ricky and Steve achieved massive success in their careers, particularly with The Office, Karl fell into an unemployed slump. Annoyed that Ricky and Steve had made a lot of money from An Idiot Abroad despite Karl being the one who was on screen for most of the show. Karl never seemed to enjoy being the laughingstock of the three, but probably put up with it for the work. He kept working with Ricky up until his role in Derek 2014, and since then he's worked on his own projects, leaving everyone confused as to why the trio don't get together and create something. It's sort of like each member of a band going off and pursuing a solo career with no explanation of why they broke up. Ricky and Steve were independently successful with no need for Karl, but loved him that much that they wanted to work with him and expose him to the world. The problem is that for years, Karl was dependent on Ricky and Steve for work. They launched his career, which allowed him to create his own shows to make money, but these shows were hardly a success. He's also done some voice acting for various TV adverts, including Smarty Mobile.
What a load of malarkey. We keep things simple. Less malarkey, more smarty. Search Smarty Mobile.
Basically, money for old rope. Karl has reportedly paid off his mortgage and he's not done bad for himself, but fans of the trio have been left in the dark over the entire thing, and there's never really been closure. The last time Ricky and Karl worked together was Derek, a fictional TV show where you don't get to see the real Karl, which is what the fans always wanted. Ricky is currently busy making millions from his stand-up comedy tour Mortality, and frequently promotes his new brand of vodka on social media.
Happy Halloween from everyone at Dutch Barn Vodka. It's a magical time of year when we try and scare kids with tales of ghosts and ghouls and vampires. All good fun. If you really want to scare children, tell them about priests and 70s DJs and my Uncle Sid. Proper wrong'un. Murdered in jail, eventually. So, dirty boy, Sid, you dirty boy.
Steve Merchant is busy rubbing shoulders with celebrities and working on big productions. No matter what they do, they'll always make a passive fortune from the Office franchise, and a new Australian remake of the show is currently being released. And as to what Karl's doing, well, we don't really know. He's the only one without a social media presence, and he's hardly ever seen in public. He's always tried to keep to himself and live a normal life, and never seemed to enjoy the spotlight. Despite the internet's best efforts, we still don't even know what his longtime girlfriend Suzanne looks like. Most people won't know this, but when Ricky Gervais wrote and directed his first movie ever, The Invention of Lying, Karl was actually flown out to Boston to shoot for the movie as a caveman character, only to be cut out of the film. The scene with Stephen Merchant was kept in the film. Karl, as you'd expect, complained about the hassle of travelling back and forth to Boston.
Straight after your holiday, you got home and then came out to visit me in Boston on the set of my film I was doing. How was that?
Well, I didn't want to do it, did I? He called up and said, do you want to come out? And
do a favour for me. Ricky said, can you do a favour for me? You thought no.
Well, no, I didn't just go no. I sort of said, what is it? And he said, oh, well, you can just have a part. And he's like, what's the point, though? I'm not an actor. I can't act. What's the point? It's a long way to go. So anyway, he said, all right, don't bother. Then a week later, calls back, and he says, bring Suzanne with you if you want. Our holiday. So I thought, yeah, I could treat Suzanne to that.
I thought a little part for him. They'd probably pay 2 flights. You know, she's coming out. I thought, share it with friends. I was
a generous guy.
Yeah, so I thought, oh, she'll love that. That'll get me in the good book. So I said, listen, we're going to Boston. She goes, right. Anyway, Ricky books the tickets and that. She can't get time off because we'd just been in Menorca. So they said, hang on, you've just had a week off. You can't go anywhere. So I had to go on my own, right? Which, you know, fair enough. I'd said I'd go by that point. It'd all been booked. The costume that I needed for the film bit had been made. I couldn't get out of it. I was in too deep. Anyway, go there. Boston isn't worth seeing. I mean, you're talking about travelling the world and, you know, opening your eyes and seeing new things. There's nothing to see in Boston. It's Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. There's nothing else, is there? I'm not being unfair there. I mean, it looks nice. There's nice buildings.
You mean there's not a museum of the weird?
There's they had something to do with tea bags, didn't they? That
No, it's the Boston
hotel.
Tea Party. It was nothing to do with tea bags. It was the Boston Tea Party. That one of the founding events of America.
I know,
It wasn't something to do with tea bags.
So
Based on the way they've talked about it, it almost sounds like Karl wasn't paid for the work, and Ricky tries to make him feel better by saying he got free flights and accommodation. Since Karl was cut from the final edit, it's unlikely he's made any percentage of the profit. The Ricky Gervais subreddit has gained 172,000 members, and mostly consists of jokes regarding the old audio content. Some say that Ricky's relationship with Karl was exploitative, but everything was consensual. Karl Pilkington was always hilarious and entertaining, but it was his pairing with Ricky and Steve that made it much funnier. The constant back and forth between them, and Ricky's contagious laughter which made Karl's words even funnier. It was like listening to three friends talking bollocks in a pub. The dynamic between the three of them was pure dynamite. No matter how many TV shows or movies they make, or how many bottles of vodka Ricky sells, or how many millions he makes from stand-up, his time recording with Steve and Karl will always be closest to people's hearts. The Office is a massive franchise that's made around $10 billion so far, but it's a fictional TV series. It's a great one, of course, but nothing reaches the real-life hilarity of Karl saying something stupid and Ricky and Steve reacting to it. Usually the only time you experience natural comedy is when someone you know does or says something hilarious. And so to listen in on three friends and the lung-busting comedy that oozes out of it, from genuine interactions, is really hard to come by. Here's what the three of them have said when asked about each other.
Well, I think with Karl, it was... For those that don't know, we did this radio show, as I mentioned, Ricky and I. And, you know, if you've been listening since the beginning of the podcast, you'll recall when we last left our heroes, they'd been fired from that radio station. Well, after the success of our TV stuff, they invited us back and we returned as the conquering heroes. And we hosted a radio show. And that was where we were given a man to produce and press the buttons. And that guy was Karl Pilkington. And Karl, we thought, was just a guy, you know, just a tech guy and a producer guy. And we started asking him questions on air, and lo and behold, it was a goldmine of brilliance. And I think my fondest memory is the first moment we were talking about something on the air, and Karl was telling a story, and he said, blah, 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 and the next door neighbours who kept a horse in their house. Anyway, they'd gone away for the weekend, and we were like, "Whoa, what?
They kept a horse
in the house?" And he's like, "Yeah." Anyway, and he didn't realise that was the interesting part of the story. He just thought that was a bit of
that's not a big deal.
That's not a big deal. And then we pursued whatever avenue that was, and we found out about this crazy family with a horse in the house. And I think that was when we're like, "Oh, this guy's just gonna." It's just incredible.
Do you keep in touch? You talk to him a lot?
Of course, I saw him. He was here in LA. I saw him just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, you just think does it make you smile right when you see him?
He's just a sweet man. He's just a great man, a really great guy. Terrific, and I love him.
Was it sort of pre-planned, or was it like a more organic?
Well, when it was initially, it was just Ricky and I on a radio station, and we would kind of have a quick chat beforehand, and then we would just make up as we went along. And then we got given this producer, Karl Pilkington, and we asked him a question. He was just there to press the buttons and make tea and things. And I forget, we asked him a question, or he was telling a story or something, and he said something about blah, 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 and the neighbours, you know, and they were the neighbours that had a horse in the living room. Anyway, and we were like, what do you mean anyway? Let's go back to the neighbours with the horse in the living room. And for him, that wasn't the interesting part of the story. And we quickly realised that he was sort of gold dust, you know, and he just almost anything that you asked him was just dynamite, because he just had this completely unique view of the world. We were talking once about celebrities who are only famous because of who their father is. So in, you know, Callum Best, whose father was footballer George Best, Bianca Gascoigne, you know, lots of, and we were saying they're only famous because of who their dad is. And Karl said, well, you could say the same thing about Jesus. And you're sort of like, yeah, that kind of makes sense in a way. And I remember we asked him once to explain evolution, and he said something like, evolution's easy, isn't it? It's you know, it's like slugs, monkeys, mermaids, man. It's like if you'd found a magic lamp, you know, and you could just rub it every week, and magic would come out, really. And so then it really became a show about him, really. We got Karl Pilkington to, you know, talk about eating penises, you know, when he's in the jungle.
I could eat a knob at night.
And so now, and then of course ultimately he's doing his own stuff now because he doesn't want to share the money with us, or sensibly be tortured without him knowing it. Because that's the thing, you know, once you make someone a celebrity, they then have a lot of power and they can turn around and go, no, why on earth would I eat a sheep's penis in the jungle?
I wondered how your relationship with Ricky has changed over the years. To many now, he's seen as kind of a slightly different persona, at least publicly, than he used to be.
He's just, you know, he's hardworking and he's very reflective and he's very thoughtful. He doesn't, you know, he's not that person. I used to joke with him. I used to say, you know, Rick, someone asked me if celebrity has changed you, and I told them, no, you've always been a cunt.
Building on the previous question, I was wondering if you would still consider working with Ricky or possibly Karl in the future.
I would do, yeah, absolutely, yes. There's no reason not to. I think certainly with the radio stuff, the podcasts, we just, you know, we did a lot of hours of that in the end. I mean, I wouldn't want to tot them up, but, you know, we did the radio show every week for, you know, and that was 2 or 3 hours at a time, and we did that for quite a few years, on and off. We did a lot of the podcasts, and that's a lot of time speaking in a room with each other. And you just, at some point, you start to feel like you're going over the old ground, you know, and even as someone as rich and genie in a lamp as Karl, there's only so many times you can go back to that well without it starting to feel like, you know, overkill. But yeah, I mean, we used to try to get Karl to do tours, you know, like university tours, and 3 of us would sit and, you know, you guys could ask him questions, and he would never do it. He was always fearful of going out on the road, so that was a bit of a missed opportunity, because that would have been fun, and maybe that's something we could still do in the future. That would be fun, I think.
What about a TV show or a film with Ricky?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I think we're sort of in different parts of the world a lot. I spend a lot of time in LA and he's in London or New York. You know, we worked together again, sort of pretty cheek by jowl for over 10 years. And I think it's just that feeling of slightly kind of of being pulled in different directions creatively, you know, sort of I feel like, you know, like we're saying with the drama, I'm kind of more interested in that. And not that he's not, but I think generally he wants to perform in the stuff he does. And I feel like I'm quite happy for neither of us to perform and to let other people perform. And I think it's just not quite something that he's as interested in. And because I think a lot of Ricky's humor is about him putting it across and him presenting it, which is why he's so good at stand-up. Whereas I'm kind of more interested, I think, a little bit more in the sort of nuts and bolts of making stuff. And he likes to just get stuff done, you know, he's impatient, he likes to just do it. Whereas I'll happily spend months, years kind of grinding it out, you know. So I think if the right idea was there, it would be good to do something. But at the moment, there's nothing on the horizon.
Can you see the Karl Pilkington radio shows coming back at any time?
The thing is with that is, people ask me, like, and I do miss it, and I even now and again listen to some of the old ones. I don't think it would work. Karl became my little public experiment.
Because it felt so unscripted.
It was unscripted.
And that was
totally
what
unscripted. That is real. It was unscripted. He was like my little experiment. I always thought that Karl was like, I'd found a 10,000-year-old caveman and shaved it, thawed it out, put clothes on it, and then tried to teach it sort of art and philosophy and science. Because he had a good brain. I kept telling him, I said, you've got a good brain. You've got a good brain, you just don't use it. Baby born, half monkey, half... I was going, it's not true, Karl, it's not true. He'd go, look at him. I go, it's just a hairy kid. He's a hairy kid. He's 100% human, he's got a lot of hair. Says here he's half monkey. It doesn't matter what it says there, Karl, it's not half monkey. But I think he became sort of a little bit more worldly wise.
I suppose it's that chemistry that you guys captured in that show. It's hard to replicate that kind of chemistry.
You couldn't contrive it. I discovered him, he opened his little slack jaw once, and he said something, and I just, my ears went up like that, and I just thought, this guy's interesting. It's like I found him under a rock. I don't think it would be the same. He's sort of retired now.
It doesn't matter how many times I re-listen to it. It's still golden.
People send me tweets of like clips, and I'd completely forgotten about them. But so I think he's learned his lesson, and I think he's sort of content. I just don't think it would work now.
So Karl and Ricky are still vaguely in touch despite not working together for years. Fans seem to be disappointed by how Ricky responds when asked about Karl and Steve, and Ricky never brings them up unless he's asked. Steve was always the nicest guy of the three, and seems to be the most willing to work together again, often praising the other two for what they've achieved and how funny they are. When Ricky gets asked about working with them again, he just closes the subject by saying that it wouldn't work if they did something nowadays. In 2016, the movie David Brent Life on the Road was released. Shockingly, there's no involvement from Stephen Merchant whatsoever, despite him and Ricky creating the David Brent character together.
It's not a film of The Office, no. It's Ricky doing a film about David Brent.
And he goes on, doesn't he go on tour?
I think he's sort of making it as a musician, or trying to make it as a musician.
Oh, okay. But you're not involved with that?
I'm not involved with that.
Has he dropped you?
He's no, I just he's obviously he revived the character a couple of years ago for different things, and I've been doing stuff, in my own groove, and we kind of got out of sync in terms of our schedules, really. I'm doing stuff in America and this play and other things.
As far as we know, Ricky hasn't spoken to Karl or Steve for years. There's no hatred between them, but the busy schedules and creative differences seem to have created a rift. I wonder how Karl feels about the subject.
Now look, what about Ricky Gervais? This is a quote, if people don't know it. He said, this is Ricky Gervais saying this, not me. Received wisdom says there's a fine line between a genius and an idiot. Not true. Karl's an idiot, plain and simple, very simple. Some people have proclaimed him a genius, but they're idiots. Now, Ricky and you, would you get back together again, like a sort of boy band? The way that they do.
Yeah, but is that a good idea? Is a boy band getting back together a good idea?
Well,
ever?
Take That was a good idea, don't you think? Take
Right.
That, maybe? No, OK, we're going to fight.
I just think you've got to leave things.
Right.
They were good.
They had their time.
People liked them at the time.
Okay.
You bring them back, it's never as good.
Right.
I think people like the idea of going back to something they liked when they were younger.
Sure.
I mean, we stopped doing the podcasts about... Well, Idiot Abroad was 10 years ago.
Was it really?
10 years ago.
Wow.
And people are still going on about it.
I know, but that's because people loved it.
Yeah, but I wonder if it came back now, if people wouldn't like it, because, things have changed, haven't they, with, sensibilities and that.
No, that's true.
That'd probably offend everyone.
There you are.
I mean, yeah, does anyone want to see that again?
I don't know. I think they might.
Despite the fans wanting a reunion, Ricky and Karl just seem to hate the idea. We all know that if it did happen, it would be a huge success, even if it wasn't as good as the old material. The band Oasis just got back together and made an absolute fortune. Does anyone believe that Oasis will be as good or superior to their prior form? Or are they just overwhelmed by a sense of nostalgia and willing to love the product no matter what god-awful sound it may produce? There's always a chance that something magical could happen, but don't hold your breath. For now, we're stuck with what we have, and all these years after the first XFM radio shows, the community surrounding Ricky, Karl and Steve is still very much alive, even if their relationship isn't.
People always talking about whether you've fallen out with Steve and Karl or not.
I know. I purposely don't answer them because it annoys them.
Right. Feel free to not answer them.
No. I haven't. It's like we've been doing. I've always been doing my own thing, and now they are as well. No, not at all. This the divorce thing, or it's so.
Who would keep Karl, you or Steve?
Oh, I would.
Right.
Yeah.
Got custody. Right. In a little cupboard.
Let's never say never, but for quite a while, it's goodbye from me, Ricky Gervais, Steve Merchant.
Goodbye.
And Karl Pilkington.
All right.